Here with a review for Hannibal, the 2001 film starring Anthony Hopkins, Julianne Moore, and Ray Liotta. The story, which is a sequel to Silence of the Lambs, takes place some years later with Agent Clarice Starling heading up a bust on a noted drug lord. However, in the process, the whole operation is bungled and she gets the blame, and her career slowly starts to crumble. At the same time, however, Hannibal Lecter, the noted serial killer and psychologist, is living in the Italian city of Florence and is working at the Capone Library. In an attempt to save face, the FBI reassign her to finding Hannibal again, and she meets up with one of his surviving victims, Mason Verger, a sadistic millionaire whose face was horribly disfigured by Hannibal, and is since then obsessed with getting revenge on him, and believes that Starling will be the method through which he can obtain it. The acting all around is pretty strong, with immediate praise going towards Moore and Hopkins. Hopkins once again does a magnificent job in the role of Hannibal Lecter. He's sophisticated, gentlemanly, yet ruthless and calculating, and he's always a joy to watch on screen. And Moore, obviously having to fill in the shoes of the Academy Award-winning Jodie Foster, does relatively well with the job and has good chemistry with Hopkins, though she isn't given as much to do. Mason Verger is played by the always versatile Gary Oldman, and even under pounds of makeup still delivers a surprisingly good performance, somewhere between sympathetic and repulsive, which is the whole point of the Mason Verger character. And you do feel his anger and rage towards Lecter. Ray Liotta plays a corrupt Justice Department official and a superior of Starling. And though the role is, relatively speaking, a bit on the one-dimensional side, he still manages to pull off the typical smug, stuck-up, somewhat womanizing official, and serves as a decent foil for Starling's strong female role. And of course, over in Florence, where Hannibal spends a good portion of the movie, the Italian actors all do really well, and they don't have overly thick accents, so they're easy to understand. And the actor who plays the main detective, who discovers that Hannibal is in Florence and decides to try and catch him for some reward money put out by Verger, is played really well, which is funny because the actor who plays him is known in Italy for more comedic roles, yet he pulls it off really well, and we do see his desperation and frustration at his present situation, as well as his increasing doubts about whether or not it was the right decision. From a visual standpoint, the film also delivers the goods, and it's no surprise given that this was directed by veteran Ridley Scott. The cinematography here is crisp. The camera is used very well here, in particular in Florence, where there's many beautiful vistas and pans and wide shots of the city, and you get to see all the old architecture and bridges and houses, and it looks really beautiful, almost picture postcard-esque, as well as some great lighting work, in particular during the nighttime sequences, mostly with Hannibal, which do add mood and atmosphere and serve as an extension of Lecter himself and give him a sort of eerier quality. And though there is the odd bit of gore here and there, it's not as in your face as in, say, Saw, and the special effects team here really did do a good job. It looks realistic, it's bloody, but it's not to the point where it's over the top or cartoonish. And Verger's prosthetics look really good and repulsive, and it does look like actual skin and muscle that just healed poorly. And the score is no slouch either. It's provided by Hans Zimmer, who collaborated with some other composers such as Klaus Badelt and Patrick Cassidy, and it is a thing of absolute beauty. Whereas Silence of the Lambs score was much more about suspense and being on the nose and hitting it hard, here it's much more melodious and lush and has a more operatic tone, which fits with the story, which I'll get into a moment when we talk about scripts. And in particular, I want to bring up the Vide Cormelm track, which is played in the middle of the movie during an opera sequence, which in and of itself is shot really well, and there is no dialogue during that sequence, and it's allowed to speak for itself with the music and the actors' expressions. And the music is just beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of opera. It's based on one of Dante's sonnets. It was written by Patrick Cassidy with some assistance from Zimmer. And it is just absolutely beautiful and haunting. Don't believe me? Here's a snippet. And that's only part of that absolutely gorgeous track, but I respectfully digress. Now for the important thing, which is the script. And before we get into the real meat here, I feel that there's something I do need to address, and that's how does Hannibal stack up to Silence of the Lambs? And I know this is a comparison that has been beaten around all over the place by so many people over the years, but I feel the need to address it here so that I can talk about the story in the correct manner. The fact is, these are two different films, and I don't mean that as in they're just two different films with the same character. I'm talking about as in they're two different films thematically and in style. Silence of the Lambs is a psychological thriller. Hannibal is not. By no means is it a thriller of any kind. It's a drama with elements of horror and black comedy in it. And in many regards, that was sort of the right area to go. It would have been very difficult to replicate the thriller aspect a second time round. Because, let's face it, once you reveal the monster, it's very hard to make them scary again. Or do it as effectively as the first time round. But by going in a different direction, what we got was variety. We got something that was different. We didn't get just a retread of what had gone before, and we got a film which feels like it's trying to stand on its own 2 feet and be looked at on its own merits. The simple fact is, it's not Silence of the Lambs, and it's not trying to be. What Scott Harris and writers Steve Zillian and David Mamet have done here is take the story in a new direction and look at Hannibal and Clarice in a different light under different circumstances. We now see Hannibal in the open, and though he isn't as scary as he was the first time round, we get to see more of him and what he's like and how he interacts in normal society as opposed to being locked off in a cell like in the first 2 films. Manhunter or Red Dragon, depending on which you prefer, and of course Silence. And the story takes a reversal of Silence in that now it's Clarice who is in a sense getting trapped and boxed in by the corruption and incompetence of the justice system that she works for, while Hannibal is out there free. And the movie boasts a number of great moments in its own right. It's got a number of great little sequences in it. Hopkins, though he isn't as scary as the first time round, is still every bit as interesting to watch, and Mason Verger is an interesting villain in that, unlike in the other Lecter movies, bar the prequel, the villain here is more of an equal rather than just a run-of-the-mill killer like the Tooth Fairy and Buffalo Bill were. They were, for all intents and purposes, intellectual inferiors. Here we've got someone who's more closer to Lecter's playing field. And it creates a much more interesting dynamic. Not to mention the strong chemistry between Moore and Hopkins makes for a number of great moments and dramatic scenes that are really effective. And you get more of a sense of this strange relationship that these two have, who are for all intents and purposes complete opposites in personality, yet somehow have this deeper connection. And indeed the film should be praised for at least taking this route and exploring it more, rather than just retreading and having them be on opposite sides, for the sake of being on opposite sides. Not to mention, little things like the gore here are not used as gratuitous or cheap thrills. They're here to show Lecter's capabilities and his ruthlessness, as well as his complete lack of remorse. Scott understands this and he makes the most of it. and the film is fairly well paced, and doesn't waste too much time on exposition or red herrings like you would expect. Not to mention Hopkins gets a great couple of lines here that are great black comedy one-liners, and certainly none of the characters or the actors in the film ever behave in a manner that would suggest they're bored or that they're not written all that interestingly. We even get to see Barney again, who very much acts as one of the more realistic human voices in this cast of strange characters. But regardless, I didn't say the film is perfect by any means. At points, it does a very poor job of explaining locational transitions, considering that, though I did say the cinematography was very good, which it is, especially in places like Florence, when it gets to areas like the countryside, it can feel a little bit samey. It looks good, but it doesn't really make much of an effort to distinguish from Italy and American countryside, and at points you'll wonder, wait, since when did he or she get there or go there? Also, Clarice doesn't really get that much to do in the story. She's not given any sort of character arc, and she's really only there to go after Lecter again and ultimately have the scene where she and him realize their relationship is much more than what they would have thought it before. And as such, she comes up much more as a pawn and a tool of both Verger and Hannibal as they engage in this sort of battle of wits. But even with these problems, I found Hannibal to be very entertaining and enjoyable. And I understood the mentality and the mindset behind it all, and I could get into it without actively comparing it to Silence of the Lambs throughout. And so I must give Hannibal a silver star, but a low one. To me, comparisons between this and Silence of the Lambs are pointless, as these are two separate films in two separate genres. One is a thriller, the other is not. And Hannibal certainly has a lot of its own merits. It's stylish, it's got great production values, the music is absolutely incredible, and Hopkins is still as strong as ever. Though there's no getting around its problems with story, at least it's never completely incomprehensible or idiotic. It may not be perfect, but it's definitely worth your time, and it's certainly one of the more unique sequels out there.